folks, welcome. In this video I'm going to show you how to make pie charts and bar charts in Excel. These types of charts are often used to show the distribution of categorical variables. Before starting though, I do need to point out a couple things. First, different versions of Excel are going to look a little different. I'm using Excel on a MacBook Pro, which will look different than Excel on, say, a PC. Second, there are different ways to do things in Excel. The steps I'm going to show you are good for beginners, but an experienced Excel user might know some shortcuts or have a different way of accomplishing these same tasks. So we'll start by making a frequency distribution, which shows us the values that a variable can have and the frequency with which these values are observed. And we'll look at a variable that measures the educational attainment of a sample of tourists. And as it turns out, we have this variable in cells B2 to B501 in the spreadsheet, and it's coded as follows. So a 1 represents less than a high school diploma, a 2 represents somebody that has a high school diploma, a 3 represents someone whose highest level of education is a 2-year college degree, a 4 represents someone whose highest level of education is a 4-year college degree, a 5 represents someone that has an MA or an MS degree, or say a master's degree, and 6 represents somebody that has a PhD or a professional degree. And missing values are coded as 999. So before we even start making the pie charts and bar charts, it's good practice to kind of make a shell of what the frequency distribution is going to look like. So you see that I have two columns here. One says highest level of education, and the second one says number of tourists. And you see that we have the different educational categories here. Less than high school diploma, 2-year college degree, 4-year college degree, master's degree, or PhD. And then you see that we actually have the formulas written out that we're going to use. So you see the formula equals count if B2 to B501, comma 1, equals count if B2 colon B501 2, etc. So before we even get into the spreadsheet, sometimes it's useful to sort of set up this shell so then when you get into the spreadsheet, you know exactly what you're going to do. So I think we're ready to go, and let's jump into the spreadsheet and see if we can make a pie chart and a bar chart. All right, folks, so here we are in our Excel spreadsheet. We have data on the educational attainment of some tourists, and sort of my dream come true. This variable is in the B column, and it starts at B2, and it goes down to B, whoops, went past it there. I was speeding. Gonna get pulled over by the cops for speeding. And here it is to B501. So we have 500 observations of tourists and their educational attainment. So as you scroll through the data set, you see the 999s. Those are people that weren't willing to tell us their level of education. You see some 5s, 4, 2, etc. Okay, so let's set up our frequency distribution. So do it right here, education, count of tourists. We'll say less than high school diploma, 2-year college degree, 4-year college degree, MA/MS degree, PhD or professional degree. I think I spelled all those correctly here. And to do the frequency distribution, we need to count the number of observations that fall in those categories. So equals count if B column is a 1. Oops, this is set up as percentage for some reason. Let's make it a number here. So there were only 2 in our sample that had less than a high school diploma. Whoops, still percentage. So we will grab all these and change the format to numbers. All right, equals count if the B column is 2. So 60 have a high school diploma. I'm going to center this. Also, we don't need the decimal places here. Equals count if 3 equals count if B is 4 equals count if B to B is 5 equals count if B is 6. Again, can get rid of the decimals here. All right, so here we have a frequency distribution. It tells us the values a variable could take on and the frequency with which these values are observed. And also bear in mind that there are some missing values. I'll put the missing down here. Missing equals count if. It looks like it's going to show up as a percentage, but I'll be able to change that in a second. Whoops. And change this to a number. Again, don't need the data. Okay, so there were 13 missing values. Unlucky for some, lucky for others. And let's put in the total number of non-missing values. So we can say equals sum. What do I want to sum? I want to sum the value from E3 to E8. And that's, whoops, once again, a percentage here. Change it to a number. And so there are 487 non-missing values. Okay, so now let's make a percentage frequency distribution. So we will copy and paste our categories. Copy and paste. So here we have the categories. Now we're going to call it percentage of tourists. And let's calculate the percentages. So to calculate the percentage, we will take the count that have less than a high school diploma and divide it by the number of non-missing observations. So we'll say equals what's in E3 divided by what's in E9. There we have the percentage, just like we like. So that tells us that 0.4% of the tourists have less than a high school diploma. Now, I'm going to show you a trick. If you wanted to, you could actually go in and you could put in by hand the formula for high school diploma, 2-year college degree, 4-year college degree, etc. But we can also copy and paste the formula that's in this cell right here as a little bit of a shortcut. So first I'm going to show you how you don't want to do it. If you take this particular cell, which is E3 divided by E9, and if you copy it and paste it in the cell below it, we're going to get an error. The reason we're getting an error is because Excel is based on relative address. So when you copy what's in this cell, move it to this cell, it goes from E3 divided by E9, and it changes to E4 divided by E10. In E4, you have the number 60. E10, there's nothing. It's like a 0. So it's telling me we're trying to divide by 0. So a way to get around that is to tell Excel, hey, I'm really serious. I want you to keep the value E9 to use to divide for these other values. And what's the most serious thing you can think of? Well, it's money. So if we put a dollar sign in front of the 9, we're telling Excel we are serious that we want you to freeze that value. But I didn't put a dollar sign in front of the number 3, so when I copy and paste this formula, it will update. It'll go to E4, E5, E6, etc., which is what you want because you want to divide these other counts by the total number of non-missing observations. So watch what I'm going to do here. I will quickly copy and paste that, and here we have it. Now we have the percentage of tourists for all the educational categories. And just to make sure we didn't mess up, I'll say equals sum, and this will sum to 100%. Ooh, okay, there we have it. All right, so now with all that, now we have our frequency distribution, we can make a pie chart. I could keep the 100 here, but I'll get rid of it because we don't need it. All right, so how do we make a pie chart? Well, we grab the categories and the percentages. So we have all this in our cursor here. And we tell Excel we want to insert a chart. What kind of chart? Well, we want a pie chart. So here we have a kind of a start at a pie chart. Sometimes it's nice to put the categories on the pieces of pie as opposed to down below. So we'll go to quick layout, and it just gives you different ways that you can lay out your pie chart. So let's click layout 5. See what that does. Okay, so that's not too bad. It gives us our categories, and let's give it a title. Educational attainment of tourists, and n equals 500. And also, I always like to move my charts and put them on their own tab. So if I click Move Charts, it'll give me an opportunity to move it to New Sheet, which is Chart 1. So I click on this. I always find it a little bit easier to read. Of course, the font's got small here. So let's go in and change the font. Is 18 going to be too big? No, actually that's not too bad. Well, maybe we'll use 14-point font. Oh, actually this is not bad looking at all. And maybe I'll even put these in bold so it's a little bit easier to see. Also, you have to keep in mind, remember there were 13 observations that were missing values. So let's put in a text box. We'll make that a note. Figure does not include 13 missing values. So here we have a pie chart. It has a nice title, Educational Attainment of Tourists. It shows the different categories, and it also reminds the reader that there were 13 observations that were missing values. All right, now you might remember from a different video that I kind of talked about how you can use pie charts versus bar charts. And sometimes if you have a variable where you have a very, very small percentage of observations that fall in a category, instead of using a pie chart, sometimes it's good to use a bar chart. So I'll show you how to make a bar chart. To make a bar chart, you also start from the percentage frequency distribution table. So we can grab the categories and the percentages, go over to Insert, and Excel shows us some recommended charts. So this looks like a bar chart that we want. So we'll click on this, and you see some different options. And I should point out that Excel actually calls what I call a bar chart, Excel calls a column chart. If you tell Excel you want a bar chart, it will give you horizontal bars. and I like to see the vertical bars, so I use what's called a column chart. I guess I'm sort of old school. I still call these bar charts. So we will click on the chart here, and actually this looks pretty good. As usual, I like to move the chart into its own sheet or its own tab. I think it's just easier to work with. So here we have a start at a bar chart. First thing to notice is that there are pretty large gaps between the bars, and that's actually good because you want those gaps to remind people that these are distinct categories. Let's pretty this up a little bit. So we will increase the font size, and we'll increase the font size here. Of course, we need to give it a good descriptive title. First, let's increase the font though. Educational attainment of tourists, N equals 487. Remember, we started with a data set of 500 observations, but there were 13 missing values. And we'll put a note in a second to remind the reader that there are some missing values. We also want to label the axes. That's very important. So you click on Chart Design, and you want to add a chart element, and that element will be an axis title. So on the horizontal axis, see if I can, whoops, I didn't mean to move that, so I will go to Edit and undo the move. All I wanted to do was change the font size. Let's see if it'll let me do that. Hang on. Make that 18 point. There we go. All right. We'll say highest level of educational attainment. And then we will add a title for the vertical axis. So back to chart design, add chart element, axis title for the vertical axis. And I'll grab that, and then I will increase the font size. And the good label for this axis is percentage of tourists. So we need to insert our text box to make a note about the missing observations. So let's increase the font size so we'll be able to read the note. Note, figure does not show 13 missing observations. All right. And sort of distracts the reader in that spot there. So let's move maybe the note up here where it's not as obvious. Okay, so I think we have a nice looking bar chart to display this categorical variable. You see the categories of educational attainment, and what's nice is that when you make a bar chart, it inserts the categories in the order in which you have them in your table. And this is nice because it shows it in ascending order for higher levels of education. Both axes are labeled. There's a nice descriptive title. There's a note, again, that reminds the reader that there are 13 missing observations. And importantly, there are nice big gaps between these bars to remind people that these are distinct categories of educational attainment.